or the willingness to go on the dark side and use a belt sander. The quickest way to turn a ferrule, if you've done your due diligence, is you've already found a ferrule that matches very closely with the outside diameter of the hosel, and all you need to do is an acetone wipe. You see, acetone will melt the plastic. If there's only a small lip, then rubbing a paper towel or a clean rag soaked with acetone against the ferrule and the hosel is all you may need to do. Be careful to go along the entire circumference of the hosel. It should take only seconds to do. I've got a few tips here. Acetone evaporates very, very quickly. This method only works if the paper towel or the clean rag that you're using is wet, not just damp. If you have a dry towel, very little will melt and the finish will be faded or dull. With the towel soaked, not only will it melt the plastic, as you'll see evidenced by the black apparent on the paper towel, but the acetone will also provide that nice shiny finish. And you can rub the acetone-soaked paper towel on the ferrule in either a circular rotation or an up and down motion. If you look closely, you'll be able to see acetone lines. So you want to do it one way or another, not both, when you're doing multiple clubs within a set. Again, make sure the towel is kept moist during this procedure so you get a nice, shiny, smooth ferrule and not cloudy or have milky white streaks in it. Finishing the ferrules can be just as easy as that. One other manual method of finishing ferrules involves several steps. This would be situations where you have more of a sizable or a prominent lip than what the acetone white might do. Long gone are the days where the ferrules were much, much larger than the hosel. I remember teaching students the technique of using a file first to remove the bulk of the material. This would be scary at first because you didn't want to damage the hosel on a metal wood or an iron. And in the case of wooden woods, you would actually have to remove some of the wood on the neck of the club. With ferrules more standardized in sizes, along with hosels, you might have to remove some excess material, but this can usually be done with sandpaper. So you want to first secure the shaft in a vise within a rubber shaft clamp, where you have plenty of room to work around without interfering with the vise or other obstructions. Next, you want to tape the area of the hosel directly below the ferrule to protect it from any accidental sanding marks. Plus, it may not hurt to mask off the shaft as well, especially with today's shorter length ferrules. The key is to create a smooth transition from the ferrule to the hosel. So you want to start out by using a small, like 3/4 to 1 inch strip of sandpaper. And 240 or 320 grit is probably recommended. When sanding, do so uniformly around the entire diameter of the ferrule and the hosel. And I find that if I use a shoe shine method, just like you're going back and forth on your shoes with a rag, to flush with the top of the hosel, that's going to work best. And to ensure you get it evenly, you'll periodically want to loosen the jaws of your vise and rotate the shaft so you can inspect your work. And after the hand sanding is done, you want to use a piece of 0.000 or 4/0 steel wool to remove any of the scratch marks that you're going to get from the sandpaper. Remember that the finer the sandpaper, the fewer the scratches that you'll have. And this should leave you with a nice surface with only minor scratches, making the next step easier to accomplish. As a final step, you want to apply acetone to the paper towel like I mentioned before. Apply the towel to the ferrule in a circular or an up and down motion, but not both. And be consistent from club to club, otherwise upon close inspection you'll be able to see the difference. And like I said before, make sure the towel is kept moist during this step, and the result will be a nice, shiny ferrule. Okay, for those of you who want to speed up the process, you can use a belt sander equipped with a special white linen belt to turn the ferrule. Before you run off and buy a belt sander, you probably want to listen up here. When we talked in a previous webinar about abrading shafts, I mentioned the pros and cons of using a 1x30-inch belt sander versus a 1x42-inch belt sander. Here's another example why you should probably invest in the larger 1x42-inch sander. You see, the 1x30-inch belt sanders are cheap and readily available. They're pretty much all the same except for they have different brand names slapped on them. The problem with using one of these for turning a ferrule is the belt speed. The 1x30-inch machines run at 3,450 RPMs, which is great if you want to remove the chrome off a steel shaft or grind the tip off of a shaft for through-bore installation. But this is about twice the belt speed as most 1x42-inch belt sanders. Can't you use a rheostat to throttle the motor speed down? Well, not really, because the small sanders are direct drive. So once you try to gear it down, it just simply stops. With the higher speed, more material is going to come off, and it's going to come off quickly. So it just magnifies any mistakes that you're going to make. It's been several years ago since I worked for Dynacraft. I conducted an impromptu clubmaking class for one of our distributors in Canada. The class was held in the dead of winter in an old storage garage that housed mowing equipment. Our distributor was kind enough to bring some of the equipment so I didn't have to lug it across the border. And one of the tools at my disposal was, of course, a 1x30-inch belt sander. I was thinking to myself, what had I done to the distributor for him to punish me this way? I was so used to my trusty old 1x42-inch belt sander that I'd used for years. Well, I explained to each of the attendees the pros and cons and gave them the spiel of why you should never use the smaller machine to turn down ferrules. I predicted I'd probably burn up the ferrule, but I at least proceeded to show them the proper technique anyway. Well, lo and behold, I think that was the first time I ever used a 1x30-inch machine and had the ferrule turn out perfect. I can tell you from experience it just doesn't work that way, even if you do it on a day-in, day-out basis. In the club-making schools I helped teach for years, we'd set up the different size belt sanders and let the students go nuts on them. Even by closely mentoring them and demonstrating how it worked, well, let's put it this way. Turning a ferrule was not like riding a bike. This operation takes some skill, patience, and a lot of practice to perfect. I remember vividly that students would go back to the hand sanding method, which to them was something they would do once they left and go back to their shop, or they just felt more confident they weren't going to destroy the ferrule in the process and have to start from scratch. But a few of those were bold enough to try to see if they can do what the instructors made look so easy, and that was finishing the ferrule in a matter of seconds. There is a certain technique to do it right with either size machine that you decide to use. Okay. For starters, you don't want to sand against the platen, that little hard metal piece sticking behind the belt. Rather, you want to use the flexible portion located in the middle of the belt, as I have pictured here. Hirekos does sell a belt sander with a special turning fixture in combination with the bench grinder. So you can cut shafts, you can abrade them, and you can turn down the ferrules, and that cuts down on your workbench space. A commercially available belt sander